Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and once again it is time for the Monday Q&As. So let's knock this out. First question. Hey Jason, I had a very high volume full body workout, but usually go with mid blah blah blah. We don't need all that. It was an amazing workout, but I wasn't able to take enough food and calories in the same day because I was very busy working. He says he's sore, but in a good way. No, sore is never a good thing. I don't know why people get that idea. But I feel like that because I couldn't take in proper post-workout food. Do you think I lost my muscle gains? All right. This is kind of the whole bodybuilding idea. This comes from the world of bodybuilding, of serious competitive bodybuilding from the past. This idea that a single workout is significant or that it matters. And that's why they do all this large amounts of volumes for one body part weight a long time. And it's usually because they're on large amounts of drugs that they can make noticeable gains week to week doing that. In the real world, the way the body really adapts, individual workout mean very, very little in the grand scheme of your progress. You can have one bad workout or have one really bad day of nutrition after a very serious intensive training session, and the way that it affects your progress over any significant period of time will be unmeasurable. Like, you could have 3 of those happen in 1 year and it won't make any measurable difference in the amount of gains that you make over the course of a year. Everyone's going to have days where they don't get enough food, they don't recover enough, their training sucks. It's not going to matter in the grand scheme of things as long as you are consistent with your progressive overload and things. It's the total cumulative work that you do for any training cycle and how you recover from it and the food that you get in is really going to determine your gains, not this little minutia. When we start arguing about minutia day to day, you're talking about trying to glean a last 1% or 0.5% edge. One bad day like that with your food is not going to impact your overall progress or results. It's just not going to matter in the grand scheme of things. You really shouldn't think about it and worry about it like that. In fact, even worrying about it at all will probably elevate your stress hormones more, your cortisol levels, and it could actually impact your gains more than the bad workout or the bad nutrition did because of the actual stress from it. All right, next question. Is there any point to taking a pre-workout that doesn't include caffeine as the primary ingredient, especially for those who may be worried about heart trouble but still want a short-term energy boost? If you have a heart condition and you're worried about heart trouble, you shouldn't be taking pre-workouts at all. There's no reason I would ever take anything that stimulates arousal in the gym or that causes you to want to push yourself harder when you have a heart condition that you're concerned about. And any decent pre-workout is going to have stimulants in it. And the other thing is, I'm not really a big fan of pre-workouts, so I don't know why I'm being asked this. I don't use a pre-workout. I don't advocate pre-workouts. I'm just not a fan of them for other reasons I've covered in the past, outside of maybe black coffee. So I'm kind of the opposite. Caffeine is the only pre-workout I really have any interest in whatsoever. And that's easy to get in a nice, delicious tasting coffee form. But yeah, if you have a heart issue, I wouldn't be messing with pre-workouts at all. Nothing that's going to have any sort of stimulant in it if you have a heart issue that you're concerned about. So caffeine or not, I wouldn't be taking a pre-workout. All right, next question. What do you think about Steve Shaw's rep goal system, especially with weights over 75% of your 1 rep max? A lot of you guys know Steve and I are friends and we talk quite a bit. No, I think his rep goal system is pretty good. I don't see Steve's rep goal system as being really in a lot of ways much different from any other form of progressive overload. It's requiring you to do a given amount of work in a workout based upon a progression pattern, and so it's absolutely a viable method. Is it going to be better or worse than some other form of progressive overload? No, it's going to be the same, and the whole point is that as long as you're getting the progression in and it's a system that helps you reach your progression, then it's going to give you the results that you want, or at least the results that you're capable of getting. Obviously, all of us want better results than we ever get, but it's going to give you the best results that you're capable of getting because you're getting structured progressive overload in. All right, next question. I keep hearing that building muscle and losing fat at the same time is pretty much impossible unless you are a beginner, and yet everyone keeps talking about recomps. How the hell do you recomp then? The problem with recomps is that they're simply more difficult. Oftentimes with people recomp for reasons of they need to maintain a certain leanness or body weight for competitive purposes or for modeling purposes or whatever. But in terms of your actual progress year to year, people who are recomping are generally not going to make as much progress as people who don't, unless drugs and things start coming into the mix. So recomping is oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes slower than clean or bulking and cutting in terms of overall how much muscle mass you're going to gain over the course of, say, a year or two. So it's not always good in that regard. And number two, the reason they're so difficult is that they're more exacting. You have to work around your recovery more. You don't have a lot of margin for error. If you're trying to successfully recomp and you're not a beginner, you're not on drugs, you don't have margins for error on your recovery. You don't have room to do silly stuff inside your training. You don't have room for mistakes inside your training, because what you can find is that you're either not going to stimulate enough growth because you don't have the extra energy, because you're maybe doing the wrong things in your training, and you're going to get less progress out of it, far more so than if you were eating sufficient calories or eating a calorie surplus. And the same with the recovery end. You're not getting the recovery aspect from the larger food intake. So oftentimes recomping when your training load is too high is going to bury you, and you're simply going to get reduced results also. So recomping is really tricky in terms of getting your training right. You don't have the same margin for error you do when you're eating in a surplus in terms of making actual muscle gains. So it's more difficult, less margin for error, and it tends to be slower. So that's why it's talked about in that light. All right, next question. If I'm around 13% body fat with very slight but still visible abs, do I need to be in a calorie surplus, if any, at all, to make progress? I realize my progress will be extremely slow, but I weigh around 180 and would like to stay under 185 as I'm competing in the 181 class of an IPA meet within the year. I don't want to have to dry out too much before weigh-ins. It's my first meet and I really want to compete at my best, and carb depletion may impact my performance if I don't do it correctly. I'm coaching myself as a learning experience. All right, go back to that last question. This is the type of person who needs to recomp. No, you don't need to be in a surplus, but now that you're actually having to recomp for competitive reasons, keep in mind that you need to focus on your training economy. You can't overdo your training. You need to keep progression a little slower. Don't bury yourself with excessive workload. You really need to be careful of that if you're going to try to recomp in this weight class as an athlete. The other thing to consider, at a point for you, you might want to start staggering your calories. I don't normally recommend that, but you're going to want days of calorie deficits and calorie surpluses. What I'm generally going to recommend is that people who are trying to recomp like you're doing, assuming you're trying to do it drug-free particularly, getting a bit more carbs the night before you train. So eating your carbs later in the day on your non-training days, because you're probably not going to train more than three or four days a week anyway. So more carbs before bed that night. Keep yourself kind of in a surplus through that day. Same thing the next day you're training. Maybe eat a heavy carb load after you train to restore glycogen. And maybe keep your calories a little higher on your overall training dose. So remember, maybe a calorie deficit on your non-training days. Eat most of your carbs before bed. Calories a little higher on your training days, so that you keep your overall caloric intake the same through the week, and that might be the best way for you to go for what you're trying to do. But again, getting your meal timing is actually going to become important for someone who's trying to do what you are doing in a competitive environment. For most people, meal timing is largely irrelevant. It's going to start mattering for someone like you in this situation. All right, next question. Thoughts to stomach vacuums. Stomach vacuums are a valid form of core exercise. They work the transverse abdominals very effectively. And for a lot of you guys who are trying to trim your waistline down, particularly girls too, like women who want to look good in their bikini or in their underwear, stomach vacuums aren't a bad choice, but also men who are trying to pursue that sort of thing. Doing stomach vacuums can help train your core to stay a little tighter and sucked in just a little more when you're actually relaxed and walking around. All right, next question. Is there an acceptable degree of form breakdown when going for a 1 rep max? Also, are the Olympic lifts and their variants necessary for general strength training? I think they're cool, but not necessary for myself, since I'm neither an Olympic weightlifter nor am I a field athlete. If you're not an Olympic lifter or a field athlete, I wouldn't waste my time learning Olympic lifts. They're just not worth your time for you for the most part. As far as the first question, an acceptable degree of form breakdown is whatever is required in competition. Assuming a competition max, whatever it takes for you to lift the weight within the confines of the rules is what's acceptable. However, in the gym, there shouldn't be any form breakdown on training maxes. If you're hitting training maxes, which are gym maxes outside of a competitive environment, you shouldn't be experiencing any noticeable degree of form degradation. If you do, you need to check your ego at the door, because you're not helping your training. The whole point of doing training maxes in the gym is so that you can get stronger. If you're doing them with a form degradation and you're just cheating the weight up for your ego because you're trying to hit the heaviest weight humanly possible, you're not training the same strength pathways and motor patterns that you should be. So you're not getting a training benefit from doing that. You're not helping yourself in any way. And the reality is, the person who hits training maxes with clean form and goes just a little lighter and hits the heaviest weight they can hit without form degradation And they do that on their training maxes versus some guy who just does an ego lift gym max every now and then. The person who does the former is going to get more out of it over the course of time. They're actually going to get stronger, truly stronger, which is probably better for your ego than just flopping weight around. So yeah, form degradation should be minimal outside of the competitive environment. All right, next question. Wanted to be lifetime drug-free, not because I have a moral issue with taking gear, nor do I care about the natty versus enhanced thing, or that it's cheating, because I didn't want to risk my health and deal with the side effects. However, the TRT study, which you made a video about, convinced me that I'd still start using TRT at some point when I'm older. What would be appropriate age to start? I'm currently 26, intermediate advanced. I've been lifting for 6 years since I was 20. Good question. You know, it really varies. I'd recommend TRT when your testosterone levels start to plummet. If you're a male, start getting your testosterone levels tested at 30 about every 2 years or so and see where they're at. And if they're low and they're not where you want them to be, if they start hitting basically under about 300 or lower nanograms per deciliter, is when you're going to want TRT. And there are plenty of doctors who will be happy to help you with that. There are some doctors who will prescribe you TRT even if you're much higher than that, but for most of them, they're supposed to be at 300 or less. And honestly, for most guys, if any guy over 35 who doesn't have really high testosterone levels, still I'd be considering it anyways. But that latter is just my personal opinion. The former is a little more of what a lot of physicians would advise, and the latter is just my personal opinion. So let me just make that part clear. Just anyone who's not over 400 nanograms per deciliter still after 35, they will have a lot of fringe benefits and sense of well-being, sex drive, sex performance, all of that. Their quality of life will improve from the TRT if they're not at that point or higher at that age. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time in part 2.